Recording. So Andrea, I am so excited to talk to you today, but a little bit nervous because I've never interviewed an interviewer. So thank you so much.
I find it strange being interviewed, so it's strange, but we'll be okay.
And you're at your TV studios now, aren't you?
I am. I've just actually nipped into the dressing room so I can talk to you without the hubbub of the newsroom going on in the background. But yes, I'm at work today, so nipping in on my lunch break to do this.
I have so much respect for you on so many levels. Not only, but for like delivering the news to everyone every day, but also because of, and we'll dive into it in a minute, your incredible fertility journey. And the fact that following your fertility journey, you're now helping others. So serious, hands down, you are brilliant.
The respect mutual, by the way.
Okay, so
the respect is mutual.
Well, look, I know you have to get back, so I don't want to keep waffling and taking up too much of your time. Can you start by telling us a bit about your fertility journey? Because it was a long journey, wasn't it?
It was, and I always find that when I start answering this with anybody, it's so hard, isn't it, to kind of summarize it, because everybody's journey is so individual, and when someone asks you kind of just want to pour it all out.
Yeah.
I'll try to summarize it as much as possible. So quite early on, actually, when we started trying, we were told quite early on that they thought we had a problem with my womb lining. So for the embryo to implant, if there's an embryo there to implant, for those people that don't know, your womb lining's got to be at a certain thickness for that to happen, and then to create a pregnancy. And my womb lining, whatever drugs, protocols that they gave us, we had lots of experiments over the years with that. Nothing ever happened. So they put it down in the end to, well, must be some small genetic defect. Nobody really could answer the question. Loads of people suggested surrogacy to us, and that's something we spent quite a lot of time looking into. Loads of multiple failed and cancelled IVF cycles, and pregnancy loss as well amongst that. And then I know this, you always hear this, don't you? And it's so frustrating when you're trying, because there's no magic way of getting to this stage. But, we were on the verge of giving up and thinking, right, what do we do now? Let's plan a different life, really. And really hard to use that word miracle, because I used to really hate hearing that when I was on that journey. But, I do see her as a miracle, because she came along naturally in the end, and we'd been told that just wasn't going to be able to happen. We have our amazing, wondrous, how the hell is she here, story of Jemima now, who turned 2 last month.
My God, it is a miracle.
It feels like that, yeah. And everybody deserves a miracle, don't they? And it's so hard talking about it, because that so many people are still just hoping for their miracles. So,
but one thing that used to keep me going through my own journey was, and it's a really awful thing to say, but I loved hearing stories of women who, after many years of trying, finally got pregnant, because I figured the longer their journey, it was so comforting to think, it's all right, it's okay, it still might happen for me, and I thought mine was long. Mine was 4 years, but 7 years is a very long time to ride that epic roller coaster.
It is a roller coaster, yeah.
So you were presenting television throughout that?
Yeah, most of it I was. Actually, my husband had a contract in France for for 3 years of that, actually. So we were apart as well for a lot of that. And actually, in a roundabout way, that's how we discovered there was a problem earlier, because we were apart and we thought that was the problem, because we weren't there to do the obvious things at the obvious times. And then various discoveries later, we found there was this medical issue. So we did do some of our treatment actually in France, because I spent a year over there with him, because it just got all too much being apart and trying to tackle this problem as well. But the rest of the time, I was reading the news and doing what I do on a daily basis. Like everybody out there who's on this journey, you end up having to juggle so many things, and juggle that identity, that work identity, and sometimes just we kept it really private at the time, and I didn't talk about it openly. I sort of kept it in this kind of close circle of support of people. But that actually was good in one way, because I had my other identity, but bad in another way, because I was sort of living this double life and maybe not talking about it as much as I should.
Yes.
So I think there was kind of, it was a double-edged sword in a way.
Yeah. Did you, how did you, because I like you work in television, but I have the luxury of not being in front of camera. So whenever I felt waves of, you know, just utter grief because, you know, because the constant failure, I could just go and sort of hide or sneak into a bathroom. Did you learn sort of coping mechanisms to sort of breathing or you know, when you just felt that I can't take this, and yet to have the big lights in your face and the, you know, live, I mean, that must be some epic inner strength.
I don't know about inner strength, but it's just, you do what you have to do, don't you? And I do remember there was a time where I got an email actually about the results from, you know, some embryos in a cycle, and it was about 5:20, and I was in the makeup room, and I was due to go on air and, you know, get in there and do the records, and I just, how am I going to do this? And it was just trying to look into the mirror, and I thought, you know, the silly thing is, I just thought, you know, right, put the makeup on, because once I got it on, I can't cry, because I can't, it would just about to be even more of a mess. So it really was that kind of idea of just painting on in different face, I suppose, quite literally. And I think we've all had that moments of having to do the injections and everything at work, and, you know, scurry into the toilets to do it because it has to be done at a certain time on a certain day. I remember my husband coming in on late shifts with a bag of drugs, and we'd meet in the car park for him to be injecting me. I mean, we laugh, don't we? But this is stuff that people are doing every day, and it is really, really, really tough. So yeah, that's why I'm glad that, you know, you asked me to chat about it, because it's just chatting about it will normalise it for everybody else, hopefully, so they won't feel like they've got to hide it so much.
Yes, I honestly, that whenever you, and I'm so sorry I keep coming back to the, you know, your job, but it's so that when we watch newsreaders, they're so composed, so calm, and because they are so together, you don't ever imagine that actually there's all that shit going on at home. You know, there's so much emotion, and it's you know, absolutely incredible that you managed to stay so composed while so much was going on. And the fact, so your husband would meet you with your drugs and your injections in the, I mean,
I know it sounds ridiculous now, doesn't it? And I'd like to think that things have moved on so much now where I would, you know, somehow be able to be more open about it and say, and not, you know, you feel like there's kind of a shame around it or an awkwardness. And, you know, if we got to a place where in workplaces you could even, there was a fridge where you could keep those things or something, and it became more acceptable. And but I mean, I certainly wasn't ready to even, you know, it works both ways, doesn't it? You've got to be ready to speak to more people about it as well. So
yeah,
I think it's getting that balance right for you at the time. It's individual, isn't it? It's quite individual.
Yeah, I kept it from my work colleagues for a very long time, and I remember having to do my injections. I was doing I think it was the Enemy Awards, and so we filmed the awards in some grotty venue, and I remember throwing a band on stage and thinking, oh my God, I've got to go and do my injections now, and then quickly running backstage thinking I've got the duration of that band to quickly go and inject. And I ran to the only toilet backstage, and I'm standing there waiting for somebody to come out, and some scruffy old roadie came out, and then I ran in, quickly did my medication, and then back onto stage to set the next band, all happiness and light. And I just looked around and I thought, oh, I'd love to just be able to say, do you know what's
going on? Yeah. And I would want to emphasize that, you know, I work for ITV, and they couldn't have been more supportive throughout it all. So, and this was all things that I felt that I you know, I didn't want to talk about, and things, the injections, all of that. I just wanted to get on with it on my own. So I'm sure if I'd asked for more help, I would definitely have got it in that respect. But yeah, as I say, it was just, how do I come to terms with putting that information forward and stuff? And I should probably emphasize that the reason my husband was coming to do it, because as people all know, with some of the injections, they have to go in a certain place, which is more difficult to reach when you're putting them in your backside. So I couldn't even do that myself. So
what you've just said there is quite key, that if you do work for an organization, a lot of companies do support their employees.
Yeah, and I had a lot of support. I had
yeah,
a lot of support.
yeah, so you can go to HR and you can actually, talk to them, and some people I was talking to a company the other day, and they actually provide fertility holidays, so you can get sick pay for if scans or appointments or whatever.
Yeah.
And
I think it's great that it's moving forward like that. And I think I was really fortunate in working for a company like ITV, because they were really forward thinking and being helpful. So yeah. And hopefully a lot of other companies are thinking in different ways around that now.
Oh God, I hope so, because there are so many of us who can't conceive naturally, and actually, fertility treatment, IVF, it is just so normal now. It is, it's another path to parenthood. And so, yeah, amazing companies like ITV,
I mean, it's 1 in 6 people, I think I'm right in saying, isn't it? They're affected, couples that are affected, and I don't think that includes, same-sex couples that might be using assisted conception as well for different reasons. So that's a huge amount of people who may be going through this, and that's why I think it's so important that everybody watches things like this and immerses themselves in information, because if it's not you, it might be your colleague or your friend or family member, and it's just trying to understand what their experience is.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, so this is a good point for you to tell us about your podcast.
Yes. So last year,
Making Babies. Is that the title of your podcast, Making Babies?
Making Babies, yeah. So it did happen during kind of the pandemic year that it all came about, but it wasn't really directly related to that. It was, lots of people I know started new things during the pandemic, and this kind of was more coincidental. But we did a bit more publicity around our story, which we hadn't really been brave enough to do. And I should just say at that point that I have so much admiration for people who are talking about their stories when they're going through it, because that's really brave. So we kind of got to the stage after Jemima was born that we felt ready that we could share it and talk about it a bit more publicly. So we did a little bit of that. And I just was overwhelmed by the response that we got, really. So heartening that so many people took heart from the story and what we've been through. And and then it was suggested to me, well, why not make this into something more? So started to think about how I could do that. And actually, news is quite restrictive in terms of, you're there to deliver a story impartially, and it's very structured and very formatted program. So it's been really nice to do something where I can just chat a little bit more and hear other people's journeys and other people's stories, and hopefully get some advice out there and get people talking about things they wouldn't usually talk about. The response has been really good. So just got to keep it up now and get more people on, and it's gathering pace all the time. So
how often are you doing them?
At the moment, it's been a bit of a trial pilot series to see how it's been received. So probably about once a month to test the water and see what appetite there is out there for it. And as things have gathered pace, I think now that will probably accelerate a little bit the pace on getting them out there. So there's endless topics to talk about. So
oh my God, so many topics to talk about. It's just so incredible though that you are talking about it and that people are talking about it, just normalizing it. My journey was 10 years ago. My twins are now 10.
Oh God.
And back
do you still look at them every day and think, how are they here?
Honestly, I still pinch myself, I honestly still pinch myself. And but the thing is, when I was trying to conceive, that no one was talking, like no one. And I was so ashamed, actually. I felt like I felt ashamed of my body, and I feel so sad when I think back to how I felt back then.
And there's guilt attached to it, I felt, as well, because I couldn't give my husband what I should be able to give him. That sounds really, really basic, but there is a guilt as well, I think.
Well, actually, I was going to ask you that. Sorry, I digress, but I was going to ask, how did you and your husband stay so strong and connected over that duration of time?
It seems, doesn't it, from the outside, because of the journey and everything we've been through and everything we've spoken about, that it must, it just must have been this huge connection and all of that. And there is, but my goodness, all I can think of is, a lot of it is the absolute. I mean, you must know yourself, behind the scenes there's just so many ups and downs and so many breaking points. And but I am proud. I'm really proud that we've got through that, because it's not easy. And I don't know how we did sometimes, because all sorts of things, life also happens along the way during those years. And so, you know, my father passed away. We had somebody in a very close family diagnosed with cancer. All these other things which life throws at you are also happening when this IVF journey is happening. So somehow we managed to pick each other up. Somehow we managed to offer each other hope when the other person had lost hope, because, you know, hope is just such a crazy thing with fertility, because you don't want to hope too much, do you? Because you know you're going to be let down if you do hope, or you think you're going to be let down crushingly if you do hope too much. So it was trying to offer each other hope when the other person didn't have it, I guess. And we just had this perseverance that, you know, something would happen at some point, and we kept going. But I don't really know how. Yeah, I don't know what the essence of it is, but it's just because it's tough. But I guess really, corny thing is, I suppose it's love, because that's what you've got in each other, and whatever the outcome is, because we didn't know what the outcome was going to be, but you have to think, well, whatever the outcome is, we've got each other, I suppose.
God, you've made me feel, I can feel a bit. But you've just totally nailed it. You said, you know, when one's feeling down, the other one picks them up, and you're sort of doing that, aren't you?
Yeah, and you don't know when you're going to feel down and when the other person is going to be able to carry you a little bit, and it's just it is difficult, and sometimes you're both really down, and that's hard. And I mean, I remember times when, you know, we don't talk about these episodes much, but Lee would really be just having to get me out of bed because I was so down if we'd just had a failure or a cancellation or a loss. But I do think it's given me such a different perspective on mental health. I appreciate what everybody else potentially can go through, and I think you know, if you haven't had any problems with your mental health, it's harder to see, isn't it, how other people can struggle with that. But I think hopefully it's given me a lot more empathy for all things mental health, really, and everything related to it. I hope I understand a bit more all of things of all that nature now.
Would your husband be interviewed by you for your podcast?
Well, funny you should say that, because he has kind of been, but well, he wasn't directly interviewed by me, but I did an episode with a guy who's tagged as the Man Cave on social media, Kevin Cutton. You know, and so he's all about male infertility and getting men to speak out more, which is absolutely fantastic, because 50% of infertility problems are male issues, and we forget that sometimes, I think, and they need help and support as well. And so on that episode, I didn't actually interview him, but I jumped off the Zoom, and Lee came on to have a chat with Kevin one-to-one. And that actually was really strange, because he said things when I was editing it. I was like, oh, really? So I found out things about my own husband, about his journey and his emotion, that he would share with another guy who's gone through it, but things he'd never really properly said to me. So that was really interesting.
Probably easier talking to another guy about it. I think that's amazing, because I asked my husband about his experience, and he was just like, oh, I don't really remember anything. Oh my God, I mean, I've got bucket loads. And I was like, nothing? Yeah, so...
He probably does, but he's probably, I don't know, I think people generally repress things as well, which are bad, don't they? And men are quite good at saying, oh, that was that, move on. And it's, I don't know,
exactly.
They don't talk as much about it, but I think it's good to encourage talking more, I think.
I'm going to go and listen to that podcast with the Man Cave. Sorry,
it's really good, and he's such a great character as well, Kevin. So yeah, it's a really great episode.
Oh, I'm definitely going to go back and watch that. so what I'll do is I'll put details of your podcast underneath our chat here, just so that people can then go through and listen to them all and keep in touch with you. And but look, I know you've got to get back, so I'm going to let you go. But I just want to say thank you so much. It's so brilliant when people share their stories, and you know, and like I said, you know, the fact that you're, you know, a newsreader as well, I think is so key as well, because the more people, especially on-screen people, it just shines that extra spotlight.
I do remember watching, you know, I'd watch an interview on TV where someone did talk about fertility, which was probably more rare then, I think, than it is now, and I'd just be in floods, because you can just suddenly relate to somebody. Yeah. So I suppose that, yeah, if my story, you know, helps somebody else, that's brilliant. But I mean, I feel like I'm just reading the news, really. There's people out there doing much more amazing jobs than I do delivering the news. I suppose one thing you said the hindsight question earlier, and I suppose one thing I did wanted to say, which I didn't say, was that I think it's really easy to spiral out of control in your mind about the what if, and you think 10 steps on about your embryos or about a next cycle, and you're always kind of thinking too much ahead. And if I could be more strict with myself who was going through the treatment at the time, I would say just do not let your mind get carried away. Deal with what's in front of you one step at a time, because that's the only way to stay semi-sane, I think, through the whole thing.
That is really, really, really good advice, actually.
If only I could have followed it more. But
hindsight is a great thing, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed.
But you're passing on your hindsight now, and I always say, recycled hindsight is fantastic. So, thank you so much for that, Andrea. I adore you, and will continue to follow you and listen to your podcast. So, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to chat. It's been great. It's been lovely to meet you, and hopefully we'll keep in touch.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thanks.
Right, I have pressed stop recording. Oh no, hang on.